This week on Africa Update, climate change security tops agenda as Kenya, Nigeria and Senegal host U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. At least 15 people have been shot dead in anti-coup protests in Sudan, according to medics. Suicide bombers killed 3, injured dozens in Uganda's capital, Kampala. Plus, TrustTV speaks to first African-born Muslim American to be lectured in Maine, United States. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Africa Update, where we bring you a review of stories from across the continent. I am Iwelia. Thank you for joining. Climate change and security in Ethiopia, Sudan and the Sahel were top on the agenda as U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken arrives in Nairobi on Wednesday to visit 3 of the continent's major players, Kenya, Nigeria and Senegal. Anthony Blinken opened his first official visit to Africa in Kenya with an appeal on Wednesday for the preservation of democracy and inclusion in politically and ethnically fractured societies. His message was delivered amid worsening crisis in neighboring Ethiopia and Sudan. Before meeting President Uhuru Kenyatta and other senior Kenyan officials, Blinken spoke with civic leaders about the importance of combating what he termed democratic recession around the world, including challenges in the United States that show just how fragile the democracy can be. Blinken's trip to Nigeria came days after a leaked report said the Nigerian army had fired live rounds at peaceful protesters at a toll gate in Lagos in October 2020 and described the incident as a massacre. The U.S. Secretary said during a joint news conference with Nigerian Foreign Minister Geoffrey Anyema that depending on the conclusions of the report, authorities should hold accountable any of those responsible for human rights abuses and to do that again in full transparency.
We stand strongly for human rights at home and abroad. And that means, among other things, ensuring that governments are protecting the right of assembly, of free speech. And in that context, of course, in Nigeria, we had the NSARS protests, the actions taken by security forces, the alleged abuses, which have now been investigated by these panels that were established at a state level, and very important to provide that accountability, to provide that transparency, and, depending on the conclusions of the reports, to take action to, as necessary, reform the security forces, to hold accountable any of those responsible for human rights abuses, and to do that again in full transparency. And so we look to the states here as well as to the national government to do that when the reports are published.
On Saturday, Blinken is expected to end his 5-day visit to the continent in Senegal, highlighting Africa's efforts to help the country manufacture its own vaccines. Blinken is scheduled to visit Dakar's Pasteur Institute, which has recently received tens of millions of dollars from foreign partners to help with vaccine production. The funds include a $3.3 million contribution. Meanwhile, the U.S. will do things differently in helping Africa build its infrastructure needs, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said in a policy speech on Friday, adding that too often international infrastructure deals were opaque and cohesive. Africa, which needs billions of dollars a year to develop roads, railways, dams and power, has over the last decade received most of its funding from China, which generally does not tie the money to political or human rights related conditions. In a U.S.-Africa policy speech in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, Blinken said infrastructure needs were holding back growth and opportunity in too many places.
We'll make infrastructure investments, including here in Africa. And so, for example, we want to make sure that as investments are made, countries are not labored with tremendous debt that they can't repay. That's something we won't do. We want to make sure that the rights of workers are foremost in our minds, that the environment is protected, that there's no corruption, that comes along with these investments, that we build together to the highest possible standards.
Security forces shot dead at least 15 people and wounded dozens as thousands of Sudanese took to the streets on the deadliest day in a month of demonstrations against military rule, medics said. The protesters marching against an October 25th coup across the capital Khartoum and in the cities of Bahri and Omdurman demanded a full handover to civilian authorities and for the leader of the October 25th coup to be put on trial. Security forces fired live rounds and tear gas to prevent gatherings in all three cities, and mobile phone telecommunications were cut, witnesses said. Earlier, on a main road in Khartoum, protesters burned tires and chanted, "The people are stronger and retreat is impossible." Others carried pictures of people killed in previous protests and of Abdallah Hamdok, the civilian prime minister, who was put under house arrest during the coup, with the slogan, "Legitimacy comes from the street and not from the cannons." U.S. diplomat Assistant Secretary of State Molly P. said she had met Sudan's ousted Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok during a visit to Khartoum on Tuesday and discussed ways to restore Sudan's democratic transition. In a three-day visit to Sudan, also met Army leader General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, who told her that steps for releasing political detainees arrested during the takeover had begun, according to the Sudanese state news agency SUNA. The releases will not include those who face criminal charges. The U.S. Embassy said he also met with Mariam al-Mahdi, foreign minister in the administration that Burhan dissolved, to show U.S. support for the civilian-led transition government. The coup ended a transitional partnership between the military and civilian groups that had helped topple autocrat Omar al-Bashir in 2019. Meanwhile, hundreds of protesters took to the streets of Burkina Faso's capital demanding Kabore resign for failing to rein in militants linked to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State who regularly target Burkinabe forces and civilians. The protest follows the killing of more than 50 people in a weekend attack on a gendarmerie post in Burkina Faso, in an updated government toll showed on Wednesday. The attack near a gold mine in Inata, a territory in the northern Somme region, killed 49 military police officers and 4 civilians, a government spokesperson said. President Roch Kabore decreed 3 days of national mourning for the victims of the attack, as the government said it was carried out by unidentified armed gunmen. The bloodshed has provoked protest over the authorities' failure to curb a 4-year Islamist insurgency that has killed thousands and forced more than 1 million people to flee their homes. Now, Islamic State claimed an attack in the heart of Uganda's capital on Tuesday after 3 suicide bombers killed 3 people and sent members of the parliament running for cover in the latest in a wave of bombings. The blast in Kampala, which forced the evacuation of parliament, shocked a nation known as Bulwark against violent Islamist militants in East Africa and whose leader has spent years cultivating Western security support. Islamic State claimed responsibility via the group's Amaq news agency on an affiliated Telegram account. The nicknames of the 3 attackers indicated all were Ugandan. The death toll, including 3 bombers, were 6, police spokesperson Fred Enanga said, including police officers. Enanga said 33 people were being treated in hospitals across the country. The U.S. State Department on Tuesday again urged U.S. citizens in Ethiopia to leave the country immediately, adding that the United States has no plans to facilitate an evacuation via military or commercial aircraft as Washington steps up pressure to bring an end to the conflict in Ethiopia. The United States this month advised U.S. citizens in Ethiopia to leave the country as soon as possible and is offering repatriation loans for those who do not have the funds to leave. At least 1,000 people, mostly ethnic Tigrayans, have been detained in cities across Ethiopia in the past week, the United Nations said on Tuesday. Ethiopia declared a state of emergency on November 2nd, a year after conflict erupted between the federal government and the forces aligned with the Tigray People's Liberation Front, the political party controlling the northern region of the Tigray. The declaration, which is valid for 6 months, allows suspects to be detained without trial for as long as the state of emergency lasts and allows house-to-house searches without a warrant. In the meantime, a U.S. Special Envoy met Ethiopia's Deputy Prime Minister on Thursday in a bid to revive ceasefire talks as the government gave permission for 369 air trucks to enter famine-hit Tigray, where fighting began a year ago. Jeffrey Feldman and Olusegun Obasanjo, the African Union's High Representative for the Horn of Africa, arrived in Ethiopia on Thursday. The two envoys want the government and rebellious Tigrayan forces and their allies to declare an unconditional ceasefire and allow access for humanitarian aid to areas in northern Ethiopia affected by the fighting. Tigrayan forces say they control Lalibela and Kombolcha in Amhara and have also moved into the parts of the Afar region. Widespread hunger is reported in both. Now, the Speaker of Libya's eastern-based House of Representatives said on Wednesday he will run for president in a December 24th election that is part of a United Nations-backed bid to end a decade of conflict. Aguila Saleh's candidacy follows that of several other prominent Libyans, including Saif al-Islam Gaddafi and Khalifa Haftar, two highly divisive figures accused of war crimes they both have denied. Disputes persist over the election rules, including who should be eligible, the schedule, and the vote's legal basis, less than 6 weeks before it is due to take place, raises doubts over whether it will happen. The only law issued for holding the election is one Saleh issued in September, which critics said was done without a full vote or proper quorum. The critics said that the provisions seem designed to let Saleh and his eastern ally Haftar run without risk of losing their positions if they failed to win. You're watching Africa Update on Trust TV. Coming up, Trust TV speaks to first African-born Muslim American to be elected in Maine, United States. Details after the break. Thanks for staying with us. This is Africa Update, and here's a look at some of the top stories again. Climate change and security in Ethiopia, Sudan, and the Sahel were top on the agenda as U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken arrives in Nairobi on Wednesday to visit 3 of the continent's major players, Kenya, Nigeria, and Senegal. Plus, security forces shot dead at least 15 people and wounded dozens as thousands of Sudanese took to the street on the deadliest day in a month of demonstrations against military rule, medics said. Moving on now, Ibrahim Rotich, the husband of slain Kenyan Olympic runner Agnes Tirop, was charged with her murder and pleaded not guilty in a Kenyan court on Tuesday. Rotich, 41-year-old, had been ordered last week to undergo a mental health test before entering a plea. Tirop was found stabbed to death at her home in the Rift Valley town of Eton on October 13 in a case that has shown a spotlight on violence against women in the East African country. Rotich appeared in court in handcuffs, wearing a black jacket in a cap. He looked down at the floor for most of the proceedings. Rotich's lawyer, Jocelyn Mete, declined to discuss the details or results of his mental health evaluation. The bail hearing is set for December 1. Now, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa declared 4 days of national mourning for South Africa's last white president, F.W. de Klerk, who died at his home in Cape Town after battling cancer. De Klerk, who is credited with overseeing the peaceful transition from white minority rule in South Africa to a black majority government led by Nelson Mandela, died on Thursday at the age of 85. After South Africa's first all-race vote in 1994, he served as deputy president in a government of national unity. President Cyril Ramaphosa has declared that the national flag be flown at half-mast as a mark of respect for the late former deputy president F.W. de Klerk. A statement from the president's office said the 4 days of mourning began at sunset on November 17th. Now, humanitarian appeals always help. They penetrate deeper than political trade-offs. These are the words of Jesse Jackson. In this report, we speak to a man whose acts of service validate this quote as he earns a seat in a land where all odds were against him. Take a look. Pius Ali, the first African-born Muslim American to be elected to a public office in Maine, United States, being sworn into office as city councilor in Portland.
I was born and raised in Ghana at a place called Nsawam.
Pius, a Ghanaian photojournalist whose birth-given name is Abdullah, was on a trip to the US to procure photography equipment before he migrated to the United States in 2002. It was barely 1 year after the bombing of the World Trade Center by extremists on September 11, 2001. Faced with the stigma of being a Muslim in America, Pius left the city of New York to Maine, a migrant-dominant community where his journey of becoming a city councilor began.
When I was coming up as a public servant, I never knew that what I was doing was going to build up to an elected office.
In this interview with TrustTV, he tells us how he penetrated cultural and religious barriers through service to his community.
Well, I think elected office, it was for me was an elevation, an elevated platform, because I was working with young people in the neighborhood. But then I realized that the challenges that these young people are facing, the odds that have been stacked against them, is not just in the neighborhood that I am. It impacts their parents and then many other people in the community. So if I've been able to help these young people, I've been able to work on the board of education to make a change, then the possibilities of me scaling up what I'm doing at the city level is possible. And also I believe that the people of the city that I live in have paid close attention to the work that I do. So when I throw my name into the hat or throw my hat into the ring, I came up tops.
Working with City of Portland's refugee services, Pius spent many summers working as a facilitator for Seeds of Peace, a summer program which builds relationships and leadership skills among youth from regions of conflict.
So politics is politics wherever you find yourself in the world, right? However, there is one piece when I talk to people, I say that when you lead with compassion, when you lead, what I mean by that is that when you find yourself in a leadership position, whether it is elected or appointed, there's one thing that you need to know. There's one thing that should be at the center of everything that you do, that you are not there because of who you are. Anybody at all could or should or may have been given that opportunity. You are there for a reason, which is to serve the people.
Being a youth and community engagement specialist at the University of Southern Maine's Mosque School of Public Service, his dedication to serving his community set him apart for a much bigger role in the community he lives. Pius hopes to see an Africa that will compete favorably on the global stage.
I would love to see an Africa that is a leader in the world. An Africa we are already providing, we're giving so much to the world. I want to see that reflect in the lives of Africans. I want to see an Africa where if you drive on the streets, you don't see burgers. I want to see an Africa where the African is self-sufficient, taking care of its own business. I want to see an Africa who goes proudly to the world stage, not with an empty plate, asking for something to put into that plate. I want to see an Africa that the world respects and the world give back what we deserve when they take our resources. I want to see an Africa that receives something that is worth the resource that the world is taking away from us. I want to see an Africa whose kids will not be walking from one continent to the other so that they can end up in a country whose culture they don't understand, whose language they don't understand.
For Pius, public service is a call he has answered and will continue to impact humanity wherever he finds himself.
Elected office is a public service. It is a calling, just like the way you have an imam, you have a teacher, you have a priest, or whatever it is. People who serve the community that they live in. Elected office should be the same. So I saw it as a calling. That is my calling. I'm supposed to lead. I'm supposed to make policies that impact the life of everyone who live within that jurisdiction.
This is the most important and crucial period of your lives, for what you do now and what you decide now at this age may well determine which way your life shall go.
When Bridget Modota left her office job in 2009 to venture into jewelry design, the reaction was considerable. Here was a highly qualified individual with a master's in business administration, giving it all up to venture into a trade that in many parts of Africa is associated with handcraft and roadside stalls. However, Modota was determined. She wanted something else from life. Take a look.
When you are engaged in making a particular product, for example, you tend to forget all your stresses, all your troubles, and concentrate. Jewelry making requires concentration. When we make a particular item, we have to use all our senses so that we come up with a beautiful product at the end of the day. We've always associated the issue of pastimes like arts, crafts, to rural women, to those that are poor, to those that are not educated. But with time, we are seeing that this misconception, this stereotyping of jewelry crafters is slowly moving towards a good prospect of looking at them as anybody is able to do jewelry.
Now with that, we wrap up Africa Update for today. Join us again next week, same time on Trust TV for more. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us across all social media platforms. I am Iwelia. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.